After having recently done my live investigation with Lucius Aurelian into the 1893 panic, we took a closer look into some of the robber barons of the time. J.P. Morgan came up, ties closely with Andrew Carnegie, which we'll be focusing in on here in this video. Carnegie's an interesting character. He has a lot of ties with the early railroad narrative, with the Pullman Company, which comes up in that live broadcast, and also the manufacturing of steel and the construction of bridges, we are told. And when Carnegie reaches the age of 65 in 1901, he starts eyeing retirement and ends up selling his steel company to J.P. Morgan. And we are told at the time it is the largest industrial takeover in American history. Upon completion of the sale to J.P. Morgan, the steel company, he becomes the wealthiest man in the world for a time, surpassing John D. Rockefeller. And he pours a lot of his energy into the philanthropic venture of creating these free libraries, and not just creating buildings, we're told, but also stocking these libraries. So just another one of these robber baron philanthropists that I think we need to question the narrative on. In this video, we're going to be looking at a handful of some of the most amazing libraries in the United States. Thanks for being here. We begin this library tour in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm going to call them temples. Temples for reading, not so much libraries. They look more like temples. This is a 2-year build time on this one, 1900 to 1902. They take it down in 1977. At a time when Atlanta has less than 100,000 people, Carnegie decides to build a temple for reading and, of course, stock the library with no doubt books of his choosing. So you can see how, looking at this through the lens of a new narrative being created for the people, of course my suggestion is that these buildings were already standing and they were being outfitted with new material that suited the inheritors and the New World narrative attempted to be pushed, and was being pushed on the people at the time. And you can see even after they tear this thing down, they saved a little bit of it because it's just so majestic. It really is, if you saw this somewhere in the Middle East, you would definitely think this could be 2,000 years old. If you take away the Carnegie sign and maybe the writing at the top, change the writing for some Latin, but you have temples being constructed, we are told, at the turn of the century by a wealthy philanthropist for the betterment of the people, we're told. And we realize now in the modern day that these wealthy philanthropists are not looking out for the best interests of the people, but rather there seems to be a much more sinister agenda afoot, according to what I'm seeing anyway. You don't have to buy into my narrative. We have Baltimore, the Peabody Library. Interesting part of the narrative on this one too. Apparently Carnegie takes his inspiration from a library that was created in Baltimore. Interestingly, not this library. This is the Peabody. Carnegie taking inspiration from the Enoch Pratt Free Library, also constructed in Baltimore in 1880s, this one supposedly. But we'll be looking at the Peabody Library. And this is the interior of the Peabody Library. It's something they're doing in the 1870s in Baltimore, all for the sake of book storage and reading, giving the knowledge to the people. What knowledge are they actually trying to convey to the people? I think it's a valid question. So 150 years ago, they're building libraries like this. And in the modern day, when the population is 2 or 3 times what it was then, they're building libraries like this. And of course, let me know in the comments if you're having trouble seeing the disconnect between the two. Absolutely incredible architecture here. No square inch overlooked. Absolutely incredible. And you can see on the front here, the Boston Library is built by the people dedicated to the advancement of learning, of course. This one constructed by McKim, Mead and White, we are told, and if you look at the list of construction that they're supposedly responsible for, should tell you all you need to know really about who these gentlemen were. And supposedly over 25 million works or books are housed here in the Boston Public Library. This is the central branch. And McKim, Mead and White, of course, had to cover everything with marble, in this case curved marble, going along the arches here. Truly remarkable and hard to envision, again, this being done at that early time period, before the 20th century, before any sort of power tools as we know them. The technology just doesn't appear to be there in the narrative. So what we're doing is we're questioning the storyline that has been laid out for us. If these buildings were constructed at the time, it's certainly not in the manner we are being told, and not by those who we are being told are responsible for constructing these. And taking a closer look at the libraries and the contents of these libraries, apparently the Boston Public Library housing a lot of information on the American Civil War. I think these are keepers of the narratives, really. And in this video, you're not even going to see many of the university libraries. I do have a file on that as well. Even just across the states in North America, these things look like Gothic churches, cathedrals, and no doubt there's a lot of information being stored in those places as well. Notice the very high ceilings, and then try to comprehend the difficulty of constructing in such a manner at any time period, let alone in the 1800s. And every square inch covered, this looks like mosaic tile on the underside of the arches. Truly, truly remarkable. And you have a bit of the old and you have a bit of modern starkness in the background here, having the feel of something you might find over in France, reminding me a bit of Le Mont Saint-Michel, actually. The Boston Public Library Central Branch. And of course, we are provided with a construction photo. In this field of research, we know that there is all sorts of problems with the construction photos we have been provided. This also looks like it's a bit of a piecemeal attempt. You can see a completed building up to a certain point, and then it looks like they're just trying to show us that they're stacking blocks. I just don't see the thought process being there to produce what we're seeing here. It just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe you can help me make it make sense. Truly remarkable building, though. This is the Chicago Public Library, opened in 1897, right after the Panic, I guess, of 1893. This is no longer a library. Apparently it is a arts and cultural center. And why not? You should definitely keep this open to the public. You take a look at some of the interior again, looking like mosaic on the walls here. You got a spectacular coffered ceilings, impeccable interior finishing. Now, you have to couple all this with the amount of construction said to have been going on at the time. So it wasn't just, as covered in other videos, the courthouses and the state capitals and the train stations, and it was also libraries popping up in the form of temples, basically. Far superior to what we see in the modern day construction. Truly, truly impeccable works of art. And it is nice when you see these things still standing and have the ability to go and visit these buildings. Quite breathtaking. And a little bit confusing. Chicago has quite a few libraries. If you try to do a search on this one, you have to type in former. to get the actual building you're looking for. It can be a little bit tricky. So much going on in Chicago. Definitely an old world hub. And there's a nice look at some of the mosaics you can see as you zoom in closer. The mosaic work there. And of course, if they found this, buried in mud on the other side of the world, they would say this is Roman mosaics. So I have to wonder, is it an imitation of what the Romans were doing, or is this all part of the same civilization? I know for a lot of people that's quite a leap, but I think there's a lot to be said. I don't think the Gilded Age was a mimicking of a former past glories. I think it's all part of the same glorious civilization at different stages of destruction. Cincinnati Library. Now this must be after Cincinnati had shaken the name of Porkopolis in its early years, become quite the cultured city of about 200,000 people at the time this one was constructed. Of course, meets the wrecking ball in 1955, no doubt under the guise of urban renewal. Not much to look at on the exterior, but when we get into the interior, really is quite something special. This multi-leveled aspect of this one repeats in a few places, as you'll see as we go through this presentation. Really like the spiraled staircases, but the ornamentation is for 1870s in Cincinnati. Really, it really starts to paint a different picture of the past, one that we are not given as we come up in this system. And in case you weren't sure, it was the public library. They have it painted on the side of the building. And Cleveland having its own public library. Apparently this one being built after World War I, we're told, after a contest of architects to figure out who would be the ones to build it. Not looking like a lot from the exterior, but again, when we look in the interior, we're seeing certain motifs repeat. You have the mosaic ceiling, the archways. Very, very intricate. And they're doing this right after World War I. You have to wonder how many able-bodied construction workers met their fate in the conflict, and how many were remaining to construct this kind of library. There's all sorts of problems with the narrative and the timeline we're given. Easy for history to become muddled and altered through the generations of the last 150 years. Denver, 1910. I guess another one of the temples for reading. I'm going to see what the modern library looks like. My God, what a mess. Let's get back to the temple for reading. There it is. It does still stand, not used as a library as far as I know. Anyone from the area, of course, feel free to add your 2 cents. Looking very old in this photograph. Looking like it's from the 20s, this photograph. Supposedly built in 1910, looking very old at the time. And just a little look at the interior. Again, very detailed floor. Impeccable work. Detroit Old Library. Not bad from the outside. Definitely has an old world feel, but this is very similar to the Cincinnati Library I showed earlier with that multi-leveled effect, but this is very, very ornamental. Amazing structure. And apparently if we go back to the 1870s, we have architect by the name of George D. Mason working hard on the plans for this library. Would become one of the city's greats, apparently. Apparently this one sees the wrecking ball in 1931 as a result of the construction, supposedly, of a new library funded by Andrew Carnegie. Take a look at that. You have a natural light coming in through the ceilings all over the place. So who's designing these skylights in the 1800s. It's very difficult to, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure Detroit has all sorts of adverse weather. Doesn't make a lot of sense to be packing snow and elements on here without getting all sorts of leaking and all the rest of it, unless everything is done to perfection. A truly remarkable structure, and why on earth would you tear that down? The only thing I can think of is to help erase the past. Here's another one in Detroit. No doubt this is the Cass Gilbert designed, another one of those architects. Andrew Carnegie funded libraries with impeccable mosaic work on the underside of the arches. I think all of it is a false narrative. Remarkable how much marble is used in these structures. The coffering, again, we see this is octagonal coffered ceilings with the rosettes in the middle, all hallmarks of the old world, in my opinion. And all sorts of paintings in the ceiling areas. So much design, so much detail. This one opens in 1921, we're told. So right around that World War I, right around the time that they're eliminating a generation of people, we're being told that all these structures are going up. So, you tell me, you've got the Spanish flu, you've got World War I, you've got the all sorts of revolutions around the world, and got libraries shooting up here. Turning the clocks back to the late 1800s, 1898, we have another library going up, this one in Milwaukee. It's funny because it seems to be the narrative repeats no matter where I look. These buildings had to be expanded because everyone was receiving all sorts of volumes of books and needed more space, really indicating a setting of the narrative and a new knowledge base for the people. This is some of the interior of the Milwaukee library, a lot of them having very similar look and feel, and I do wonder the original intention for these structures. Maybe they were some form of library in the old world and they were changing the content that was available. Don't know. More rosettes here in the underside of the dome. Apparently this was part of the public museum as well, so it doubled as a museum and a library at the time. Remarkable looking structure. Milwaukee, really a marvelous old world city. And I have done a video on, I think, every city you're seeing in this video. And of course, we get a very similar construction photo to what we saw earlier, where the building is just sort of working its way up. You have columns looking somewhat unsupported, just sitting there. Even here as well, it looks like it's been chopped. I don't know what to make of that. What are we seeing on the back side here? Seems a bit silly to me. And again, supposedly going up at a time where the entire continent is coming out of the panic of 1893. So let's just throw that in the mix as well. Like, why on earth would you be building in such a manner, cladding everything in marble? The added expenses to that are astronomical. You wouldn't think that being so frivolous would be accepted by the general public, especially for a reading space and a storage place for these books at a time when you almost the country almost went bankrupt. This one has a bit of a confusing narrative as well. We're told 1927 was when this one finally opens to the public, the free public library. That's why the sign looks so after the fact. You wouldn't know unless you saw the little black letters on the side. That's why they've got all sorts of cherubs. And again, the rosettes and the acanthus leaves everywhere. You have the nice high ceilings. This must have been because of the Roaring '20s. They decided they would build this way. And you have bookcases that looking quite small compared to the height of the ceilings in here, actually. It's like they needed to find a designation for the structure itself. ticking all the boxes. Actually, absolutely spectacular. I really enjoyed the moldings, how perfect everything seemed to have been. Looking like a griffin, a lion with wings. Interesting thing to add. Let's twist that this way. Some sort of angel figures in the architecture. Looking like very perfect marble floors, coffered ceilings. Nothing simple, nothing plain about anything that was being done. Even what we're told is 100 years ago they're building like this, but certainly nothing we would ever attempt to duplicate in the modern day. A few more from that region. This is in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh. I'm going to show you a couple. Here's another one. Again, you can check out my Pittsburgh video if you want in-depth analysis on these structures and what they offer. This is just really to give you a taste of what to expect. It's free to the people. This is the Pittsburgh Carnegie Free Library. Thank you for making all of this free to the people, Andrew Carnegie. I'm sure there was no other intention in mind but to be a benevolent philanthropist. Really enjoy the skylights as well. Remarkable work. And there it is, a bird's eye view of this massive structure. Moving on to Providence, looking very similar to the Boston one, a couple of the other ones, opened in 1900. Still stands in the modern day, have that copper roof effect going on here. Possibly part of the energetics of the old system. And an impeccable interior as well. Interesting look here. No doubt some of this has been brushed up over time. And so many of them having that look and feel of a government, state building. The use of the arches and the building materials themselves. Seattle, Carnegie Free Library. 1-2 year build time. I don't think so. And built at a time when there was less than 100,000 people living in Seattle, and then they decided to tear it down 50 years later. I don't know how old this photograph is supposed to be, but again, this is looking quite old, and you can see the light here, so I would suspect this is a relatively old photograph as well. A little more modern. 1914. Why on earth you would tear that down? The only thing I can think of is urban renewal. Looking very old. And yeah, wrecking ball. Why wouldn't you? Ridiculous narrative. A lot of these cities, of course, having the fire narrative. Seattle, one of those. If you haven't checked out my video on the fire narratives, certainly worth a look if you're interested in this stuff. And we're told in 1912, St. Louis gets a library. Everybody gets a library. Kind of reminds me of that Oprah meme. And again, you're seeing mosaics in the ceiling. Interesting. And again, you're getting the rosettes in the coffering of the ceilings. Really amazing woodwork here. A little bit grainy, but I think you can make it a very, very difficult thing to accomplish here. St. Louis, amazing old world city. Of course, they had their World's Fair in 1904. There's so much to explore in this old world research. We're also given a construction photo very similar again to what we saw. At least this time we have a bit of a steel framework that the stones are being placed around. The other ones we just saw them going up in thin air. But again, we don't really trust much of the timelines we're given. Also, we're told this one opens in 1912. Again, designed by Cass Gilbert. We saw that once already here. So just really good at designing marble-clad libraries, apparently. And who approves these constructions without any thought to how much it's going to cost, apparently? No, it was nobody involved in the process who said, could we not just make the ceiling smooth there and save ourselves a couple $1,000s? But of course it didn't matter because Andrew Carnegie was donating all his funds, so there's a justification there baked into the narrative. Interesting quote here too. In books lie the soul of the whole past time, the articulate audible voice of the past. I also suggest that the books have the ability to create a false history that we lean on as truth. It's a very dangerous game being played there. A double-edged sword. Especially over time as these constructions, even written right into fiction novels, the assumption of a false history, a false narrative. So many novel writers will base their stories on a historical era and then do the research for that time period to give it some sort of realism. All that really does is bolster, much like a movie does, it bolsters a false impression of the past, as far as I'm concerned. This is in Washington, D.C., this one. And the last one we'll be looking at, but again, ticking all those boxes that we're used to seeing. So this is a thank you to Mr. Carnegie for providing all of these books and giving us a window into the past you want us to see, and using these old world buildings as a way for us to see it. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.